And he's currently at work on a new and different production of West Side Story. Contributing correspondent Patrick Pacheco recently sat down with Laurents to chat about his work in the theater, past, present, and future. We bring you now part one of this two-part interview.
I am delighted to welcome Arthur Laurents to On Stage. Welcome, Arthur, and congratulations on an extraordinary production of Gypsy.
Thank you very much.
Almost 50 years after you wrote Gypsy, you directed a production in which you said you've discovered nuances you never knew were there.
Absolutely true.
What are those?
Well, practically the whole thing. I'm not kidding. I started doing this, directing this, the way musicals are never directed. We sat around a table, just 9 players as it turned out, and examined every word, even the lyrics, and began to dig into subtext. Well, who ever heard of subtext in a musical? And it became great fun. You know, I can give you an example. There's a scene in it with 2 sisters, and they have some dialogue, and then they sang If Mama Was Married.
Right.
And the harmony is always so fabulous, it brings down the house. But what does that have to do with who they are?
And the entire play.
And they've never been examined as sisters. The truth of it is, they hardly know each other. And they discover each other in the scene that they don't know each other, that the mother is the reason, Rose is the reason they don't. And in the song, it's like a subtext to what they're singing. You see these 2 girls get closer and closer, and finally in the end, they are 2 sisters who love each other.
Oh, Mama, get married today.
Obviously, Patti LuPone, you said before we started our conversation that you sort of started out like this and you ended up like this. She's obviously very strong-minded, probably came in with a lot of strong opinions about Madame Rose.
That wasn't it. It's what exists so much in the Broadway community. People just, and the internet. I think the internet is famous for causing trouble. That's why it starts stories about people that are absolutely untrue and are rather nasty. Well, nobody likes a good story, a happy ending, which is the story of Patti and me. We were apart for a lot of reasons. People telling each of us things that weren't true. Also, it was true. She walked out of a play of mine she was supposed to do.
Jolson Sings Again, right?
And Jolson Sings Again, right. And I was then reputed to have said, she will never sing with Rose in New York, which I never said. And I'm not an injustice collector. And I forgot about it. And then this came up. And actually, it was Scott Rudin who brought us together.
And Tom Hatcher, I think, your longtime
Well,
partner
the whole idea. Well, this was after Scott told her to call me, and she called me.
And what are the nuances that she has brought? What has Patti LuPone as Madame Rose brought that perhaps nobody else that has ever played this role brought to it?
She's fearless, and we got to the point where she trusted me implicitly, totally. And Patti is great fun, and Rose is fun. And Patti has a terrific kid, a son. She's wild. She's a good mother. Well, in this version, Rose loves her children. She really does. And she's fun. And she loves Herbie. The only thing is, she loves being the star more. And that gets in the way from time to time. So that's why she's alone. But she's much more complex.
Everything's coming up, roses for me and for you.
Why do you you suppose that so many people in show business think this is the greatest musical of all time? Is it simply because it is the show business milieu, or is it something about what it says about show people?
Well, actually, I don't think it says that much about show people. What it says, in my opinion, is that everyone has the need for recognition. Mm-hmm. Everyone. I don't care what you do. That's, of course, is connected with the show business and having your name in lights. But I think it's much deeper than that. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to be acknowledged.
What has your collaborator, obviously, on this, Stephen Sondheim, had to say to you about this production, this particular production?
Nothing really.
Yeah. Does he still not like Little Lamb? That's a song that he's often said that he doesn't
now,
care for.
I read that recently. I never heard him say he didn't like Little Lamb. Maybe he doesn't, but I never heard him say it.
He has said that two people that have been most difficult to work with have been Jerome Robbins and Richard Rodgers. Did you find Jerome Robbins, when you worked on this original production with him, as much a pain in the butt as a lot of people have?
I had a long history with Jerry. We were friends before he was Jerome Robbins. When he was Jerry Robbins, and I was in the Army, and somebody dragged me to the ballet, and he was a ballet dancer. And by sheer happenstance, I was there opening night of Fancy Free. Uh-huh. And boy, did he turn. Mm-hmm. But he was a miserable man. Uh-huh. But he was brilliant. Yeah. And he wasn't all that difficult to work with. He wasn't much interested in Gypsy.
In the play itself? In the musical itself?
It's funny. He didn't want to, the reason I got dragged in was they asked him to do it, and he said he wouldn't do it unless I wrote it. Uh-huh. Now, just before that, we weren't talking, by the way. So then he got to the point where he said to me, "This is your show," and he lost interest.
There have been two film versions of Gypsy. Rosalind Russell has played Madame Rose, and Bette Midler has played Madame Rose in a TV television production. How happy were you with those productions? And do you think it's right?
Forgive me for interrupting.
Yeah, sure.
I loathe them.
You loathe them? Both of them?
Both of them. I think they're just awful.
Why?
Because they're terrible. I mean, Rosalind Russell, all I think of is black and white shoes. And this kind of sophisticated lady bashing around. Bette Midler, whom I think could have played it, she was doing Bette Midler, Norman Desmond, and once in a while Rose, but it was badly directed, badly photographed. It wasn't cinematic.
Who could play her now, Arthur?
Who could play her?
Yeah, is there a Madame Rose in Barbra Streisand's future? Is she too old? You discovered her, you directed her.
Well, she called me and asked me about that. Uh-huh. And she said, "I suppose I'm too old." I don't think she's too old. Oh. Rose is ageless. Uh-huh. And since there's a lot of talk about doing a movie, and I don't want to go on record on anyone except Shirley Temple. I'm kidding. But you know, let's just leave it. Uh-huh. Well, I mean, it's bizarre, people who have been suggested, in my opinion.
Yes. What's the most bizarre suggestion?
What comes to mind is Catherine Zeta-Jones.
As a bizarre suggestion for her?
Yeah. Because I think she's a second banana.
Well, we're going to stop now.
We're going to myself, but that's all right.
That's all right. You have a right. You've earned it. Yeah.
And tune in next week for the second part of our two-part interview with Mr. Laurents, where he talks about his upcoming production of West Side Story. It is time for a short break right now.